fair. So again, I hate that.
Hey folks, welcome to Make It To The Dogears. Here's a 25-minute reading of random pages.
Against traitors, he uses Vietnam, and then defense of revolution, he's bringing in the French Revolution in the 18th century, and Robespierre, and so on and so on.
Wait, was that on this
I tell
page?
you what, this is some of the precious.
I don't think I've read this one. Let's see.
History from
This one is present at the creation.
All the way through Vietnam.
The bizarre antiparticles. But as Gamble worked, nature does act in strange ways and produces not only matter but also antimatter. Drac later further deduced that all the particles of nature should have twins that were the opposite of themselves, just as in the electron.
The most illuminating way
Electron-positron case.
Of your own ideals is to witness someone
The neutron will not be discovered by James Chadwick until the following year, so the only remaining known particle at that time was the proton. Drac concluded they had to have a twin. The antiproton, a particle with the same mass as the proton but with a negative charge of 1 unit. In 1955, the Italian physicist Emilio Segre, American physicist Owen Chamberlain, discovered the antiproton and worked on it at the University of California at Berkeley. They shared a Nobel Prize in 1959.
Develops it all the way through his argument, so that he's constantly layering and giving us sort of sticking a stake into the ground, tethering it to us.
I gotta turn this down.
Of that tether, but we always keep him back around, so he keeps us grounded. He knows what he's doing. He is a very gifted writer, but he comes back in and
so we're talking about Paul Dirac.
And he says at one point,
I got a stack of pages and the whole night. Let's go.
So he'll put that out there.
They shared Nobel Prize in 1959. Dirac's antiparticles brought a new element to the world of physics.
And then he'll go and talk about some other war, and then he'll end with that. And the Valence scribes made more marks.
Every particle has its own antiparticle twin that has the same mass but opposite electric charge. Charge is conserved in particle interactions. So if a neutral particle decays in a positively charged particle, the negatively charged one of the equal amount of charge must also be produced. The total charge before an active reaction remains zero. The charge of the original neutral particle. Remember the other important fact due to Einstein: energy and mass are the same. This means that energy can spontaneously turn into mass, as we've seen before, but charge must be conserved in all such processes. These requirements lead to the production of particle-antiparticle pairs. The vacuum of space is now understood not to be empty. In fact, it is teeming with activity. According to the laws of relativity, the interchange of mass and energy in quantum mechanics, energy can suddenly, with no apparent reason, produce pairs of particles, electrons with their opposite twins, positrons. Such reactions are indeed observed in the vacuum of space. Pairs of particles can be seen through the tracks they leave in cloud chambers and similar detectors. Electron-positron pairs appear out of nowhere in space, and they disappear just as quickly, each annihilating its anti-partner. The Big Bang launched our universe 30.7 billion years ago as a powerful burst of energy. And as we have seen, energy can turn spontaneously into particle-antiparticle pairs. This is why scientists believe that the Big Bang must have created equal amounts of matter and antimatter in the primordial soup of elementary particles that followed. When these particles and antiparticles met, they mutually annihilated, turning back into energy, which then again produced pairs of particles, and antiparticles, and so on. At some point, however, this process must have stopped, but because today we live in a stable universe, it doesn't self-annihilate. Somehow, matter won over antimatter, allowing our matter-dominated universe to emerge. For equal amounts of matter and antimatter may have been created in the Big Bang, many scientists believe it had to have happened. Matter survives in our universe, and antimatter can only be observed in cosmic rays. Certain radioactive decay processes, which is artificially made in particle collisions in accelerators or in a medical diagnostic machine called a PET, positron emission tomography scanner. Scientists want to know what caused the victory of matter over antimatter, since on the face of it, both kinds of matter seem to be perfectly symmetrically the opposite of each other. Since they mirror each other, they might be expected to behave in essentially the same way. But in what way? Well, let's reverse all the electric charges of the matter particle in the universe. The matter particles in the universe. This should give us the antiparticles, but there's one more thing to do. Note that a positron, which carries a positive electric charge, curves in a magnetic field in the opposite direction to the curve of the track of an electron, which is negatively charged. So reverse the electric charge and reflect the original particles track in the mirror, we should see exactly the same physical behavior for antiparticles we do for particles.
To keep
Combining both
he sums it up by
charge
saying, this is
reversal,
actually everything that the EPA
combining
should
both
be
charge
doing,
reversal,
but
which will
your
denote by C, and reflection in the mirror called parity inversion, which will denote by P, should give us the same physics. If you perform C and P on an antiparticle, it should look exactly like a particle and vice versa. This idea is called CP conservation.
very dark and tedious.
See what we got next.
These principles that the 7-day liberation.
It says it's of human bondage. Oh, this is in the ascent of money.
For a nuclear crime. Blow up or contaminate.
European markets investors showed little enthusiasm, but the Southerners had an ingenious trick up their sleeves. The trick, like the sleeves themselves, was made of cotton to keep the Confederate economy and by far the South's largest export. The idea was to use the South's cotton crop not as a source of export earnings, but as collateral for a new kind of cotton-backed bond. And the obscure French firm of Emile Erlanger and Company started issuing cotton-backed bonds on the South's behalf. The response in London and Amsterdam was more positive. The most appealing thing about these sterling bonds, which had a 7% coupon and matured to 20 years, was that they could be converted into cotton at the pre-war price of 6 pence a pound. Despite the South's military setbacks, they retained their value for most of the war for the simple reason that the price of the underlying security, cotton, was rising as a consequence of the increased wartime demands. Indeed, the price of the bonds actually doubled between December 1863 and September 1864, despite the Confederate defeats at Gettysburg and Vicksburg, because the price of cotton was soaring. Moreover, the South was in the happy position of being able to raise that price still further by restricting the cotton supply. In 1860, the port of Liverpool was the main artery for the supply of imported cotton to the British textile industry, then the mainstay of the Victorian industrial economy. More than 80% of these imports came from the southern United States. The Confederate leaders believed this gave them the leverage to bring Britain into the war on their side. To ratchet up the pressure, they decided to impose an embargo on all cotton exports to Liverpool. The effects were devastating. Cotton prices soared from 6.5 per pound to 27. Imports from the South slumped from 2.6 million bales in 1860 to less than 72,000 in 1862. A typical English cotton mill like the one that's been preserved at Style, south of Manchester, employed around 400 workers. That was just a fraction of the 300,000 people employed by King Cotton across Lancashire as a whole. Without cotton, there was literally nothing for those workers to do. In the late 1862, half the workforce had been laid off. Around a quarter of the entire population of Lancashire was in poor relief. They called it the cotton famine. This, however, was a man-made famine, and the men who made it seemed to be achieving their goal. Not only did the embargo cause unemployment, hunger, and riots in the north of England, the shortage of cotton also drove up the price, hence the value of the South's cotton-backed bonds, making them an irresistibly attractive investment for key members of the British political elite. Future Prime Minister William Edward Gladstone bought some of the editor of the Times, John Delaney.
Ask me or anything you'd like to know, please leave a comment below. Ask me. I'd be more than happy to answer and talk with you more about this.
Okay, this says,
monumental and unfortunately
take a drink of my Coke
inaccessible. Everybody, thank you for watching Leaf by Leaf. Today, I am talking about William T. Vollmann's Fathers and Crows. This is massive work, and it will take you a long time to get through. It took me reading 5 hours a day for 10 days straight, and I read this. This was my constant companion. I read it in chairs,
dive into this
couches, in my bed, sitting at my desk, both at home
I
and
think
at work.
this says faster,
Standing at the kitchen counter.
and it says quick, your opinion, question mark.
Meals.
A television news segment approaching 3 minutes is generally long form.
Especially late at night when my eyes began to get heavy. I read it, of course, on the toilet. I read it sitting on the
A
stairs.
television news segment approaching 3 minutes is generally long form in the context of a half hour or 23-minute network news show. It might be best to think of the 1-minute news report as an art form that takes terseness, and concision to the limit, akin to the haiku or the oil paint miniature. I turn this down.
I read it in waiting rooms, like the eye doctor and so on. So yeah, it stayed by my side. This is the second time I've read through it. This time, trying to
Okay.
extract a little more out of it. It's one of those books that has so much. You can keep going.
You could
back
observe
to
the
it.
artist in progress
This is
in
the
a typical
second book
editing room of the cable's
his
news network,
7 Dreams
which spreads its news
set
broadcasting around the
where
clock.
he is
Latest
taking
editing equipment measures the raw
flashcards
bits of
throughout
tape in
the
hundredths of a
history
second.
of North
We can put
America.
in more subliminal messages that way, says an executive in the doorway. I'm only kidding. An editor with fast hands on the joystick and keyboard is working with a reporter to tighten the show business segment to be on the air in minutes. Psychologists have tried to study the limits of human perception. But these editors, trimming sounds and images to their finest, are practical experts on the subject. If they push their art past a certain point, you'll begin to sense fleeting ghosts present but not quite seen. Push further and you'll be lost, no matter how practiced and quick-witted you may be. Soundbite merely names a tool of the trade here. Nothing pejorative about it. We're just doing a soundbite, a sig-out, and then we're done, the reporter says. The sig-out was the correspondent signing off, Sam Donaldson, ABC News, Washington. A soundbite might also have been called the SOT, sound on tape, and it might have been joined by an NAT, natural sound, horn honking, telephone ringing. They trim a few more words. They watch, and he says, "That's fine. It feels truncated to me, but that's the game." Meanwhile, public opinion does move at a pace never before seen. Our communal knowledge spreads and assimilates with our almost neuronal instantaneity. Even before internet working, expressed Mellon facts, when John F. Kennedy was assassinated in 1963, an estimated 68% of the United States population knew within a half hour. The news of Lincoln's assassination a century earlier took days to spread and sink in that deeply. Although railroads and telegraphy were already beginning to form a skeleton of the modern networked world, when George Washington died in Virginia, it took a week for the news to reach New York. In older times, the opinions of masses of people gathered weight on glacial time scales. They were rarely measured or quantified. That made the act of voting in national politics so exceptional. A vote was like the collapse of the waveform in quantum mechanics. Realization of something that was fuzzy and unpredictable until that instant. Imperfect, but at least the act of measurement did not outrace the thing measured. We are bumping against the speed limit. We can take real-time communication only so far. At least until humanity becomes a single organism with parts conjoined as a light-speed consciousness. The limit is in our own brains. We have finite cruise speeds. Our own intelligence is tied with our speed of thought, speculates the cognitive theorist Douglas R. Hofstadter. If our reflexes had been 10 times faster or slower, we might have developed an entirely different set of concepts with which to describe the world. Okay, this one I might want to read. This is from a book called Talent is Overrated, but right here in the subtitle it says, "How smart do you have to be?" Let's see. But the masters, who had been studying chessboards for most of their lives, did scarcely better, placing only 6 or 7 pieces. The chess masters did not have incredible memories. What they had was an incredible ability to remember real chess positions. This feature has been repeated with players of Go, Gomoku, a game played with the same board and pieces Go, with a different objective, and Bridge, and the result are the same. Expert players have vastly superior abilities to remember real game positions, or in Bridge, hands are raised in the usual order. When the boards or hands are mixed up, the expert's memories are just ordinary. Similarly, SF's incredible memory did not extend beyond the specific task he had practiced. When he was read a list of random consonants instead of random digits, his memory was no better than yours or mine. In short, the widespread view that highly accomplished people have tremendous memories is in one sense justified. They often astound us with what they can remember, but the view that their amazing ability is a rare natural gift is not justified. Remarkable memory ability is apparently available to anyone. It may seem surprising that off-the-charts general abilities, especially intelligence and memory, are not necessary for extraordinary achievement, but it becomes less surprising when we consider the qualities that highly successful companies and business leaders look for in employees rather what they don't look for. It's certainly true that McKinsey, Goldman Sachs, Microsoft, Google, and other top companies are looking explicitly for brainiacs above all, but it's striking to notice that companies don't put extreme cognitive abilities at the top of the list or sometimes even on the list. Exhibit A would be the company that corporate headhunters consistently rate number one as their hunting ground for business leaders, General Electric. CEO Jeff Immelt has been clear about what the company is looking for. Someone who's externally focused, is a clear thinker, has imagination, is an inclusive leader, and is a confident expert. Those are behaviors, not traits. An IQ of 130 is not required in order to exhibit them. Immelt's predecessor, Welch, used a different set of criteria, but also was not cognitively focused. He was looking for four E's: energy, ability to energize; edge, which means decisiveness, but he needed a word that started with E, and ability to execute. Again, those are behaviors, and they don't require special intelligence, memory, or more specific traits. It must be said that many GE leaders do seem awful smart. Then those chess men seem to have astonishing memories, and what they really have is a little different. So without testing, it's hard to know exactly what we're seeing. It's notable how many GE leaders, as distinct from those at McKinsey, Goldman, etc., did not go to elite universities. More generally, many top-performing companies have worked hard to develop hiring criteria and have come up with lists that clearly work but not include standout general abilities. Southwest Airlines, the only airline in America to have made a profit every year for the past 36 years, is famous for seeking a blend of attitudes and personality traits: sense of humor, sense of mission, energy, and confidence. The message from these companies raises an important question. Even if superior intelligence and memory are the critical factors for success, are the traits these companies seek, team orientation, humor, confidence, and so on, will have related to success across companies, and so are the innate traits that you either have or you don't. Research suggests that some personality dimensions do match up with success at certain types of work. Yes, salespeople tend to be more extroverted, for example. Logical next question: are you stuck with the personality traits you have? Research going back decades suggests that personality dimensions don't vary much over the course of a person's life. Of course, it doesn't necessarily limit a person's achievement.
First of all, it's because of how dedicated Goldman is to accuracy and authenticity. Second of all,
Here is from
a quote
Present at the Creation again.
who said, "In fact, fiction can illuminate human experience better than
For determining the tracks of particles, okay, this says Present at the Creation.
themselves are
Okay.
devoid of meaning and insight." When I first read that quote,
For determining the tracks of particles created in proton collisions in the chamber at Atlas Center. Like CMS, Atlas has a solenoid, the working part of a magnet, which turns electric power into a strong magnetic field that bends the paths of the charged particles it detects. There are detectors at various levels inside Atlas. The inner detector charts the trajectories of charged particles that come out of the collisions. Then there is a calorimeter, which measures the energy of the particles produced. Even though they are heavier than the cousins, the electrons, muons are not stopped by the calorimeter and move further out. There they are measured by the muon spectrometer that surrounds the calorimeter, which is very accurate and gives excellent measurements of the momentum of the muons that enter. The work of Atlas detectors described more detail in Appendix A. Both the Atlas and the CMS detectors have been adjusted to account for noise, cosmic rays and radioactivity from the ground, and air and other sources of stray signals. So what they actually do measure comes only from the proton collisions. After 40 hours of testing the cosmic rays, the performance of the detectors was well understood. Then came the test with low-energy proton beams on September 7th and 10th, 2008, and it was ultra excellent. The CMS detector was tested continuously, or almost continuously, for 19 days. A certain scientist, Andre David, showed a graph of the data of the test run to a lecture hall full of many of the world's leading particle physicists. He apologized for two flat areas in the display. He said we had to stop for a day. We had a VIP visit. The French Prime Minister and the German Minister came to visit the LHC. A bit of a bummer for us. But will you take the opportunity to go home, visit your wife, make sure she's not too upset that you've been in the lab continuously for so many days. Then, pointing to the next flattening of the graph of the data collected at CMS, he said, and this occurred a few days later, one of the magnets decided to quench and leak 6 tons of liquid helium. The big quench of September 19, 2008 was a blow to the many scientists who have worked at CERN for more than a decade with an admirable dedication to their goal. Everything they had done for such an intense, long period of time was in preparation for proton collisions, and the quench not only caused millions of dollars worth of damage, set the project back by over a year, and hurt their collective pride. They knew the world's eyes were on them, and their magical machine had let them down. They realized that they had to correct the structural flaws that led to the accident, and they had to learn more about the capabilities of the colliders so such an event would never happen again. Beyond the technicalities, politics had played a role here as well. The Director General of CERN from 2004 to 2008 was the French executive Robert Aymar, who was probably a tough-minded man who pushed the operation of CERN to its limit. His ambition seems to have been to get the machine to operate at full capacity as soon as possible. This one looks good too. So this is from. Okay, this book called Evolutionary Psychiatry. Evolutionary Psychiatry, an introduction. And then I said I didn't need to read the entire page sometimes because I want to act like I'm having conversations with them. But I'm going to read as much as I can. Let's see. Static mechanism par excellence not only maintains a sensitive control of hormone levels, but also balances hunger against satiation, sexual desire against gratification, thirst against fluid retention, sleep against wakefulness. It also plays an indispensable role in memory storage. By this evolutionary stage, the major emotions of fear and anger have emerged, as well as those of love and attachment, together with the associated behavioral response patterns, bonding and mating. McLean, 1985, particularly draws attention to three forms of behavior that most clearly distinguish the evolutionary transition from reptiles and mammals. These are 1. Nursing and maternal care, 2. Audio-vocal communication for maintaining mother-offspring contact, and 3. Play. The most primitive and basic mammalian vocalization, McLean asserts, is a separation call, which only served to maintain mother-offspring proximity, which later came to maintain contact between members of a group. McLean believes that play evolved as a means to promote group harmony and affiliation. It is the thalamus singular division of the limbic system that performs the essential role in these mother offspring and peer group behaviors. There is no counterpart of this limbic subdivision in the reptilian brain. The other subdivisions of the limbic system, the amygdala and septal subdivisions, are involved respectively in behavior promoting self-preservation and procreation of the species. Conscious awareness is more an evidence of the stage of behavior, is less rigidly determined by instincts, those are still very apparent. Limbic system includes the oldest, most primitive part of the evolving cerebral cortex, the so-called paleocortex. In all mammals, including man, this part of the brain is therefore a structure of the utmost complexity, ensuring basic psychophysical responses and attitudes to the environment. An animal, deprived of its cerebral cortex, can still find its way about, eat, drink, and avoid painful stimuli, but it has difficulty attributing meaning to things. A natural predator will be noticed, for example, not apparently perceived as a threat. The neo-mammalian brain. This is a neocortex. It is responsible for cognition and sophisticated perceptual processes, as opposed to instinctive and affective behavior. The human brain. By this stage, lateralization of function between the two hemispheres has occurred, with the development of the left dominant hemisphere, responsible for rational empirical thinking, as well as the use of language and speech. Attempts to integrate the two disciplines of neurophysiology and ethology resulted in the focus of intense research interest on the limbic system, the region subserving species-specific patterns of behavior. McLean's conclusions were largely derived from animal studies, but the work of Flora Henry and Schwartz indicated that they were no less applicable to man. These researchers demonstrated that human emotional responses are dependent on neuronal pathways linking the limbic system with parietal and frontal areas of the right cerebral cortex. It appears, moreover, that this whole complicated right hemispheric limbic affectional system is under the control of the left frontal cortex, which suggests that the cold dominant hemisphere has a role in repressing or inhibiting the emotionally toned activities of the hot paleomammalian brain. It begins to look, therefore, as if Jung was right when he guessed that the archetypal systems of the collective unconscious, if they could be given a local habitation and name, must have the neuronal substrate in phylogenetically old parts of the brain. It is not, of course, possible to designate any precise neurological location for any of their archetypes. The neural structures involved in archetypal functioning must have an extremely complex, widely ramifying neurological basis, involving millions of neurons in the brainstem and limbic system, both cerebral hemispheres.
So it starts with that.
Human
And you
ontogenesis, the
finally
ethological view. Ontogenesis, the ethological
so
view.
towards the end, this is
Ethology views the human being as a psychophysical system with a built-in biological clock. Both its structure and its life cycle are predetermined by the evolutionary history of its genes. As the biological clock ticks away and the life cycle unfolds, so the system accepts and incorporates into itself the life experience of the individual. What we experience as a whole process is only the end result. We are aware only of the ontogenetic aspects of our own maturation, being largely unconscious of the phylogenetic blueprint on whose basis it proceeds. This goes somewhere to explain the naive readiness of psychologists for most of the century to give credence to behaviorist or learning theorist accounts of human development, which look no further than the formulations and the condition in which each individual has been subjected in his or her lifetime. In contrast to the tabula rasa model adopted by behaviorism, evolutionary psychiatry conceives of the human organism as a highly complex system constructed in such a way as always to be ready at successive stages of the life cycle, process certain kinds of data to experience certain psychophysical states and produce certain kinds of behavior. Maturation requires that, like a computer,